Sarah, and this is Budget Sew, where we create stylish, fashionable looks as inexpensively as possible. Today, we're doing a sew-along to the skirt of vintage McCALL'S 5136 in a size 18. McCALL'S 5136 was published in 1959 and is a box jacket in 2 lengths, a slim three-gore skirt, and a cap sleeve tuck-in or over blouse. The jacket has set-in 3/4 length sleeves. The neck, fronts, lower edge, and sleeves of the longer jacket are bound with military braid, and the shorter jacket with bias self fabric, and the longer jacket is lined. The blouse has a wide neck, left side zipper, and vents in the front dart seams of the over blouse. The dart fitted skirt has low back pleats and a left side zipper. You may remember this pattern from my very first video, how to draw a kick pleat. The link to that video is right here at the top of the screen. Now in this video, I'm going to show you how to sew a kick pleat. I think kick pleats are very elegant and stylish, and I add them to any pattern that has a slit. In addition to this slim three-gore skirt, I sewed the matching box jacket. The link to that sew-along is right here at the top of the screen. I made up this skirt more than 10 years ago out of a silk mix remnant from a bin at Len's Mill store. The silk was black with yellow, pink, and blue butterflies. It was lovely. It shimmered when I walked. Since I made up this pattern before, I'm not worried about altering it or changing it in any way. Since this pattern was published in 1959, it uses older sizing. So this vintage size 18 with a 38 bust, 30 waist, and 40 hip is approximately a modern size 16. I was very lucky to inherit this pattern from my Nana. She used this pattern before because the blouse pattern pieces are missing, as well as the waistband to the skirt. Since this piece was missing, I made my own waistband. I'm not sure though if my Nana made up the jacket pattern because I didn't see any pin marks in the pattern pieces, and all the jacket pieces were in the envelope. You can see that the pattern envelope is homemade. That's because it had disintegrated by the time I was a teenager, so I made my own. The suggested fabrics for the suit are corduroy, velveteen, linen, cotton suiting, tweed, flannel, and houndstooth checks. The blouse should be made from cotton shirtings, synthetics mixtures, printed silk or cotton, and linen. I'm using a printed silk-rayon mix that I bought from Len's Mill store. The fabric is a pale blue with deeper blue and gray bamboo leaves. Len's Mill, a huge factory outlet that sells fabrics, craft supplies, housewares, and so much more, had a massive sale to clear out some of their inventory. Their entire selection of previously reduced fabrics was 75% off the lowest ticketed price. And if you finish the bolt, it was 85% off. This fabulous fabric was part of the sale. It was previously reduced to $9.89 a meter, and there were 7.25 meters left on the bolt. That means that prior to the sale, I would have paid $71.70 for this fabric. But since I bought the last of the bolt during this sale, I got 85% off the total price, so I paid $10.75. Yes, I paid $10.75 for a silk jacket and skirt suit set, and I have enough fabric left over for another project. The link to the video of the Len's Mill fabric haul where I purchased this fabric is right here at the top of the screen, because I couldn't just buy one bolt of fabric at such low prices. You'll see in this sew-along that I don't follow the instructions in the order that they're written, so if you're following along in the guide, you'll see that I jump around from step to step. After I cut out and marked my pattern, I started by pinning the darts. The instructions say, stitch darts in front by folding each dart on a solid line and stitching the double thickness of fabric together along the dotted lines. My next step was to pin the back darts of the skirt. I like that this pattern has 4 darts in the front and 4 darts in the back for a fitted look. Over at the sewing machine, I sewed the darts, ensuring that I left a long tail of threads so that I could tie off each end of the dart. Every so often I forget to do this and snip the thread too short, then struggle to tie the knot at the end of the thread. After the darts had been sewn, I pressed them towards the center front and center back. In the past, I was not a fan of pressing my sewing, but in recent years, I've seen the difference that it makes to the garment. My next step was to pin the two back pieces together at the center back, matching notches 1 on the kick pleat and notches 2 on the lower back. As you can see, I cut my notches outward rather than into the seam allowance. The McCALL'S Easy Sewing Guide included with this pattern has a part about clipping the notches. It says, cut in notches not more than half the width of the seam allowance. For fabrics that ravel easily, cut notches outside of the seam allowances while cutting out garment. Then I pin the front to the back at the side seams, matching notches 3 on each side seam. I like how the notches are numbered on this pattern so you won't mistake which notches to pin together. The instructions say, join side seam of skirt, leaving left side free above circle if a 7-inch zipper is going to be used for a side opening, or leave seam free above notch for a 9-inch zipper. I used a 7-inch zipper, so I pinned to the circle. Over at the sewing machine, I sewed the side seams. I was so excited to sew this project. I chose to make this jacket and skirt suit set for my friend's wedding. The wedding was on a Monday morning at a museum, so I opted for a light colored printed fabric and an elegant skirt suit set pattern. This vintage McCall seemed perfect for the occasion. When sewing the center back seam, I pivoted the needle at the kick pleat for a crisp look. After I sewed the side seams, I machine basted the left side seam from the top down to the circle in preparation for the zipper installation. Before we continue with the sew along, please share this video with your friends and family. I'd love to help others sew and refashion on a budget and troubleshoot their favorite patterns. I also love sharing the treasure that I find at thrift shops. If you'd like to see more from BudgetSew, please subscribe and make sure that the bell is on so you receive a notification when I release a new video. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at BudgetSew. Now, back to the sew along. My next step was to clip the inward corner of the right back section so that the kick pleat would lay flat. After that, I pinned down the kick pleat on the inside of the left side. The instructions say, on outside, turn under the left back section below center back seam. Online is indicated to form pleat and baste in place close to fold edges. Stitch across left back on line indicated stitching through the pleat extension. Next, I installed the zipper. I'm using a Costume Maker's 7-inch or 18-centimeter zipper in a pale blue to match the pale blue silk. I bought this zipper from Fabricland many years ago for $1.20. I chose not to use an invisible zipper because I was going for the full vintage look. I always hand baste my zippers in place because if I don't, it turns out to be a total mess and I end up unpicking it and reinstalling it. My next step was to hem the skirt. I used a 2-inch hem as indicated on the pattern pieces. However, the instructions recommended trying on the skirt and marking the hemline with pins or tailor's chalk by measuring evenly from the floor. Back at the sewing machine, I removed the walking foot and replaced it with a zipper foot. Then I machine stitched the zipper into the skirt. Once it was sewn, I removed the basting thread. I used a finer sewing machine needle to sew this project. I used a unique brand, sharp size 9 or 70 needle for woven fabrics. I purchased this needle in a package of 4 from Len's Mill Store for $1.99. This small, finer needle was a great choice because it did not make big holes in the delicate fabric like a regular needle. I used white serger thread that I bought from Fabricland for $1.99 because it's finer than regular thread. Finer needles need finer thread. Then I sewed the hem. I used a blind hem stitch because it's nearly invisible from the outside. It's a creative method of folding and stitching and a fantastic way to create deep hems on garments because you need to have at least 1.5 inches of seam allowance. The secret to this hem is you tuck the hem under the wrong side of the fabric, leaving a small amount, about 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch, of the hem's edge sticking out. Now the pins are under the fabric rather than on top of it. When you set your sewing machine to the blind hem stitch, it will sew 4 straight stitches into the hem and 1 zigzag stitch. This means that only 1 stitch out of 5 is visible from the outside of the skirt. My next step was to sew down the kick pleat. On the outside of the skirt, I sewed diagonally from the center back through the pleat extension, following the stitching line to the edge of the kick pleat, making sure that I didn't catch the front of the skirt in the stitching. Since my copy of the pattern did not have the waistband pattern piece, I cut 2 strips of fabric the same width of the skirt plus seam allowance, and 2 strips of fabric a few inches longer than the width of the skirt for the overlap of the closure. Then I sewed the long strips to the short strips along the short edge to make up the inner and outer waistbands. Then I pinned the waistband to the skirt. Next, I pinned the inside waistband to the outer waistband. At the sewing machine, I sewed the waistband to the skirt, removing the pins as I sewed. One nice thing about the sewing guide that accompanies this pattern is that it shows you 4 different ways to finish your seams. It suggests overcasting seam edges, pinking seam edges, binding seam edges, and finally, turned in and stitched seams. I like that there's a drawing of each type so you can make the best choice for your garment. Since this fabric frayed very badly, I pinked all the unfinished edges. My next step was to finish the overlap of the waistband. With the right sides of the fabric facing, I pinned the overlap along the side and bottom. Then I pinned the other end of the waistband together with the right sides of the fabric facing so that the ends of the waistband were finished. Then I folded over the inner waistband to pin it in place. The instructions say, turn in and hem free edge of waistband over seam on inside. This completely enclosed the fraying edges of the waistband. At the sewing machine, I sewed the overlap first. I really enjoyed making up this skirt suit set pattern. It made me smile using my Nana's sewing pattern on my Nana's sewing machine. It reminded me of when I was a child and my Nana showed me how to sew a pincushion out of some remnant fabric. Wonderful memories. Then I sewed the free edge of the waistband down on the inside of the skirt. Instead of a button to close the waistband, I added a large hook and eye closure. Here is the finished skirt. To complete the look, I'm wearing the matching vintage box jacket of McCALL'S 5136. The link to the video of that sew along is right here at the top of the screen. I bought the 9 West white t-shirt with grommet trim at Value Village thrift store. The top is comfortable and does not take away from the elegance of the skirt suit set. The earrings, bracelet, and Precious Moments Bible came from the Salvation Army charity store. And the shoes are Comfort Plus by Predictions from the Payless shoe store. I hope you enjoyed this sew along to Vintage McCALL'S 5136. Please like and share this video with your friends and family. And if you'd like to see more from BudgetSew, please subscribe. And if you'd like to stay up to date with BudgetSew, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at BudgetSew. Thanks for watching. See you next time.